Lynn Illingsworth is a weed fanatic. She grew up on a central Queensland cattle station, so she's well aware of the invasive potential of weeds such as prickly pear, Hericea cactus, Nagura burr, Parthenium and Karki weed, to mention just a few. In fact, Lynn's parents were so concerned about the decimation of the Brigalow and Gidgee ecosystems that was occurring through the 1960s and into the 1970s that they voluntarily surrendered 13,000 acres of their own land to form the Wollansbay Environmental Park, the second largest such public reserve in Queensland. In Sydney, she became a dedicated weed person, initially working on her own in bushland reserves, then as a volunteer with the council bushcare movement, and also as an easy care gardening volunteer. Weeds are just about a full-time occupation for Lynn. My work background, John that is, was in the film industry, behind the camera. Unfortunately, it was unreliable work that had to be given up for something that would pay the bills while we were bringing up a family. Technology marched past me for the next 20 years. First videotape, then digital video. I ignored it all until Lynn told me one day about a woman who'd asked her how best to get rid of asparagus fern. This lady said she'd found some written information on the internet, but couldn't find any explanatory how-to video. Now, something I'd already learned was that if you want to find out how to do something, then go to YouTube. So I googled and YouTubed asparagus fern, and there really was nothing. Just a couple of rubbishy and quite useless amateur video clips. And when I checked other weeds, the situation was identical. So we bought a standard definition video camera and made our first film, the one that's been running while I'm gas-bagging to you. It had a tight script and an actor, Lynn. For the conclusion, I wanted an attractive shot to show that it really wasn't so hard, that anybody of any age can do this. We were up to take 8 when Lynn, seething with frustration at my pedantry, came out with this.
And you've been an eco-warrior.
And that's where Pittwater Ecowarriors was born, on the spur of the moment at Mona Vale Basin in the midst of an awful patch of asparagus fern. It was then I twigged the potential of this idea. A series of hands-on, weed-specific videos with in-depth knowledge of both the subject plant and the techniques necessary to effectively deal with it. They would be aimed directly at the householder or volunteer. If knowledge is power, and it undoubtedly is, then YouTube is the vehicle to deliver it. So Pittwater Ecowarriors then became a YouTube account. Pleased with this film, I decided upon a better quality camera with full high definition, a better lens, and a heavy-duty computer for editing. It was all a learning curve, and it still is. So, how to pick which weed to make a film on? Which is the bigger problem? The most pernicious? Is the problem local or statewide? Which is the most environmentally damaging? Where might a little specialised knowledge go furthest? Well, moth vines are horror weed,
so the
and as you can see here, we thought it should be covered.
To kill the entire plant.
Then there's the wands weeds, weeds of national significance. The initial 20 wands recently had another 12 added, one of which is Madeira vine. Madeira vine is a truly awful plant with massive invasive potential. Dealing with it requires a measure of subtlety, and I thought that made it a good subject for an explanatory film. If enough people pick up on its essentially simple message, then hopefully it will have a significantly beneficial effect. Then there's Gazania, a garden escape that's wrecking coastal ecosystems in southeast Australia. Nurseries continue to sell it without caution, so it's worth mentioning that most of Australia's serious weed problems are plants that were brought in by the ornamental garden industry. Of course, we soon exhausted our limited bank of weed knowledge. Where to turn to next? Well, to Marita McRae, of course. Experienced, knowledgeable and patient, Marita is an excellent hands-on presenter. But this brought a new problem. Whereas the first films had been scripted and were perhaps a little stiff because of that, working with Marita necessitated a free-flowing style so as to allow her to fully deliver her in-depth knowledge. Initially I chafed at this, wanting to limit the film to no more than 5 minutes. But in sitting down to edit it, I saw that there was simply too much good information falling onto the cutting room floor, so to speak.
On the big one,
So the films became longer.
do this with the knife so that the inner part of the tissue is exposed where the sap is moving, and I just put a dribble of herbicide on it. We're just snapping it over, bending it, but we don't want it to come away. So see how we've just made an opening there, but we've left bark that's connecting this bit to the lower stem, and now if the soil was dry and I'd just pull that instead of putting the knife in, it would snap off at that kink there, and then it would grow again. I would lose sight of that stem. It's important to do all the stems because often each shrub might have been cut back in the past and it might have multiple stems, and you have to do each stem. Do all the stems because often...
And as well as the bird tag for the credits that I like to include, some of them also gained a pin-hard tag. Lynn and I then attended a bitu bush workshop here at the CEC. It was organised by the state government. Also attending were Alan Hill and an old friend of mine, Alan Yule. Both men are Pittwater residents who also own property at Southwest Rocks, where they spend much of their time. In the 1980s, they started a bush care group up there, and several times a year they offer free accommodation to visiting bush care volunteers, and of course we couldn't resist. This resulted in a series of films on the menace posed by bitu bush.
Very difficult for us to deal with it with these kind of tools because there are many stems. We have to cut and paint each one. But the good thing about this one that I'm noticing is that you have a biological control which was released in tip moth larvae, and the tip moth actually chews the centre part of the plant, and you can see this webbing in here, and inside that there is a small grub, and the grub's eating out the tip, which is where the flowers come. And so if you can stop these plants from flowering, then they won't produce seeds. Each bitu bush can produce 50,000 viable seeds in a year. So as you can see, if you look along here, bitu bush forever, millions of seeds are being produced. But if we get biological controls like this that can slow it down, it works in our favour, and we've got a chance of controlling it.
We calculate, roughly, the Southwest Rocks dune care has saved about 8 kilometres of the most beautiful coastline in New South Wales from intense bitu bush infestation. It's probably fair to say that what we're all trying to achieve through the controlling of weeds is ideally the preservation of pre-European ecosystems. Now, there isn't enough money in Australia to buy this result, even if there were sufficient professional regenerators to carry out the work. So I think that in order to tackle this immense challenge, and furthermore, to maintain those areas already won back at places like Avalon Dunes, or Rocky Point on the western foreshores of Pittwater, or the Smoky Cape Range at Southwest Rocks, then the answer has to be an intelligent and well-informed public that is volunteering on a massive scale. That's what I'd like these films to assist. I'll let the pictures tell the rest of the story.